In this episode, we're going to go over my current thoughts on the carnivore diet, and this makes me so nervous.
Today's episode's brought to you by my free community found at radicallyhealthy.com, where you'll get support in adding things like a GLP-1 to your meaty movement toolbox so you can look and feel your best. Hope to see you there.
Hi, if you're new here, my name is Adrian, and I have been struggling my whole life with weight and autoimmune issues. And I have done everything from being on The Biggest Loser to gastric bypass to running half marathons to running full marathons, restricting my food, pre-making all my food, low carb for 20 years, keto, carnivore, sardine fasting, lion dieting, walking in the sun. I feel like I've done it all. And it wasn't until I incorporated eating a lot of meat, lifting weights, and a slice of GLP that things have finally started to click for me. So one of the big pieces in my whole channel has been my carnivore journey. And I'm so glad that I shared it, but things have really changed throughout time. So if you really dig into, so for those of you who are new, who are like, carnivore, if you actually dig into the science behind carnivore, it makes so much sense, and it makes you want to shout from the rooftops, why aren't we all eating carnivore? And for many years, I have been doing that. Ask my family. I've had my kids on a meat-heavy diet, at times complete carnivore, and I've been encouraging every family member of mine to eat meat. So throughout time, I had been suggesting this, but I'd also been seeing some things that were little seeds that were like, I wonder what's up with that. Are they doing it wrong? Maybe they don't have the right spot for them. Or is there something actually up with this diet? Why did I go carnivore? I was pretty sick. I had, at the end of my 5th pregnancy with my 4th Earthside child, I caught COVID and I got pneumonia on all sides of my lungs. And I've never been the same since then. After that, I had some pretty serious consistent chronic issues. My arms and legs were going numb. I had neuropathy where everything was tingling and burning. I couldn't sleep. I was peeing 26,000 times a day. My body was as stiff as a board. My neck was fusing. I was having food reactions like crazy. I was having intrusive thoughts. When I went to go drive, I would get really lethargic while I was driving. On top of that, all the brain inflammation. I was getting really spooked and having intrusive thoughts while driving, which makes driving just an absolute exhaustion to your nervous system every single time you have to drive. And being a parent with a husband who was working on the road, I was in charge of all of the driving for all of the kids. So something needed to be done. And I had found out through all this illness, I started working with a functional doctor who was like, you have Hashimoto's, your body's attacking your thyroid, and your adrenals are in the tank, and you have something seriously going wrong. And if you don't make changes, you're going to end up in a nursing home. And I didn't know what to do. My husband couldn't just stop working. And so I was kind of on my own to try to figure out, how do I heal? And that's when my dad said, you should look into the carnivore diet. I had already been cutting things. I had already cut in the dairy before I even got pregnant with baby number 4. I had already cut all chemicals and sweeteners. And after he was born and I was still having issues, I was cutting more and more plants, because if you look at the list that you shouldn't eat when you have Hashimoto's, there's a whole list, and it was a lot of plants. And then if you look at the list of the adrenal issues, it's a whole nother set of plants. And when you add it together, it seems like there's no plants left. So I was kind of starting to get the idea that maybe plants weren't helping the conditions that I was struggling with. And eventually it was like, well, why not just cut them all? So I gave it a try, and it was quite amazing. I saw a lot of inflammation. I stopped having as many food reactions, but they were still there. I got this level of fullness, though, that was so unbelievable. For the first time in my life, it was like there was quiet in my head because I actually got to be full. On every other diet I had done in my life, these low carb, low fat diets, you are never really satiated, and you leave the table constantly feeling full. Or if you eat a huge salad with a little bit of chicken on it, you may be full for 10 minutes, but then like 10 minutes later, you're hungry again because because you didn't actually give your body any kind of energy or, really that much nourishment, with there being no fat and almost no carbohydrates. So for the first time to get to have a diet where you get to be full was amazing. One of the first things I want to do is give it to the carnivore community, because this is the first community I've ever been in that was like, hey, some of the problems with American diets are that people are lacking nourishment. And it was the first time any diet was like, hey, you deserve to be full. And if you look into meat, I don't know if you've looked into it because it's been so demonized in our society, it's actually loaded with bioavailable nutrients. So not only are you getting to be satiated, but you are restoring a bunch of nourishment. You are giving your body those vitamins that it needs. Another thing that was great was learning about fiber. To this day, people swear you need fiber. But when I was eating fiber, I had chronic constipation. And I was told, oh, that's because you need more fiber. And so I would add more, and all I would get is more bloat and more gas and more constipation. There was no amount of fiber that was getting things moving. It was making it worse. In retrospect, what I've learned is that you likely, or I likely, had a bad bacteria overgrowth, and that needed to be healed. In this journey, I did all the protocols, all the gut protocols to kill the bad bacteria off, and it didn't work. It did not work. It would actually just make me sick, which they would praise and say, oh, that's die off. Yay, it's die off. That's so healthy. It's not healthy. And it would cause me like histamine reactions, and I never got better. And the problem would just return. And so I wasn't lacking gut protocols. So I just have to say, as a person who was struggling with the bad bacteria overgrowth, that cutting the fiber actually felt amazing. And for the first time, my bowels were moving, and it was just so exciting. I was elated to have bowels that were moving for the first time. When we look, if you ever watch a TV show like Alone, it's where they put you out, like, I don't know, in Alaska or something, and you have to survive on whatever food you can find. And whoever cannot source meat, they end up being medvaced out eventually because they just aren't getting nourished. They just aren't getting what they need. And so that was a really big case for me of like, oh, it makes sense. We actually need meat. So then you start going into all the podcasts and just really learning about how meat nourishes your body and what it does with your blood sugar. And it just made so much sense to me. Another thing that I'd been struggling with, which I tell you guys about all the time, is this chronic reactive hypoglycemia. And I used to think that it was solely from my surgery. And I mean, you probably even heard me say that last week. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder other things. I have been prolonged low carb, and I'm wondering if that's a contributor. But regardless, I had this chronic hypoglycemia. So I would overshoot insulin, and no glucagon would come in to bring the blood sugar back up to save the day. And so I would end up with these chronic lows all the time. And it was happening. I was super low carb. I mean, I was eating green beans and lettuce and cucumbers and squash. And I was still having these bombed out lows, which didn't make any sense, but it turns out there was a lot more hormone there than anything. Some things that I found really interesting was that the hypoglycemia was gone, and the food reactions. Oh, the brain was a really cool one. I was going from these intrusive thoughts to just a lot more peace, a lot more calm. And we're talking like in the first 3 months here, I'm feeling just this kind of body zen where like you could feel the brain inflammation coming down, and you just felt like you could handle life a lot better. Where previously I was so tired I could barely go up and down the stairs, let alone handle a kid screaming. So this initial period of carnivore brought me so much relief. And if you watch other people who can get past the runs, they will say the same thing. You'll hear the same story all the time, which is why there's so many carnivore YouTube channels, because you feel so good in the beginning that you just want to tell everyone, why aren't you doing this too? You could feel so good. My energy improved. My neuropathy slowly started getting better. I found myself having enough energy to start working out again. And let's see here. But another thing I want to add in here, though, is at the same time that I started carnivore, I started something called low-dose naltrexone, which also reduces your inflammation and can contribute to a lot of these things that I just said. But I did them both. And I feel that they were both amazing tools. If you've ever tried low-dose naltrexone, it's so silent and low that it was hard to say that it was just the low-dose naltrexone. It had to be the combination of the two that was giving me this major relief from all these symptoms. Another thing I'd been struggling with was chronic anemia. Oh, and I had low stomach acid because of probably the bad but bacteria, but also because of my gastric bypass. So prior to carnivore, I was really struggling to eat meat, and going on to carnivore, I built up, and it didn't take that long. I built up more stomach fluid to be able to process meat for the first time in 10 years. So that was kind of a blessing, because before that, if I ate hamburger, if I ate scrambled eggs, they would like scrape the side of my stomach, and I would pretty consistently get clogs where the food is just stuck, and it feels awful when you get a clog. I can't remember the last time I've had a clog, but eating a lot of meat really got that gastric fluid to come back. Unfortunately, some of these things just didn't stick. So, for example, the gastric fluid, I started let's start with the weight. Initially, I saw what just felt like a lot of weight loss, but I think it was a lot of inflammation. That ended by month 3. And by month 3, I had to start getting strict because I started gaining weight again. Already 3 months in, I'm starting to gain weight again. And chronic weight gain has been a problem my whole life. So starting month 3 is when I started fasting, because they talked about how fasting was so great for healing and for your weight loss and for your blood sugar. I started being even more exercising, tracking everything I was doing. I think I was tracking the whole time. But month 3 is when I joined my first group. And over the next year and a half, I joined so many of the best groups in the carnivore community. One more thing for the carnivore community, because as I go here, I think the carnivores are going to start hating me. But I want to give one more positive for the carnivores, which is you don't just get to nourish your body. You don't just get to feel good. You also get community. And community in itself, if you talk to my friend Scott, who runs Meat Stock, community in itself is such a healer. To have friends, to have support, to have people you can talk to, it is such a great healer. And so along with all of this, I got community, and it honestly filled my soul. I've always been the weirdo. I've always been the person that struggled. And to have other people who were like, listen, we're struggling too, but we're willing to go through all this and do extreme things to heal ourselves and to feel better. It was just really good company. Also, to be around people who would question things. I always question things. It's nice to be around other people who would question things and don't look at you funny when you question everything. So that was another positive for the carnivore community, was the community that it comes with. I mean, you'll almost not meet better people. So I dug into podcasts. I no longer listen to anything else but learning about nutrition, learning about functional medicine, learning about different things to clean up my environment. But at the 3 month is kind of when it was like, okay, there's more to this picture than food. And praise the Lord for Judy Cho, because Judy Cho from the beginning had said, if you have these symptoms and it doesn't get better, you likely are also sensitive to your environment, and you have to look into something called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which is a swear word in our house. And so I knew there was something up with our house. And so I tested our house and found that the house part of the reason that I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker is because during COVID, we had been locked in our homes where I live. And so being locked in a home that has issues that make me sick, it was bad. So the next thing I did also was move out of my home into a cleaner environment, we hope. But it's been move. Long story. Anyway, so I'm starting again to struggle with the weight gain. When I fast, my stomach fluid is tanking out quick, and I have to rebuild it every time I fast. The brain is still doing good. The neuropathy is still doing better. My arms and legs still aren't going numb. Like, there's significant improvement, but my energy is still in the tank, and I'm still having chronic weight gain, and I'm still having horrific brain fog and memory issues. But some people would say those things just take time. So we're going to keep going. We're going to join groups. I decided, you know what? We're all just so different. Some people need to take this a step further to heal. And so I started looking into sardine fasting, water fasting, fat fasting. And I did those consistently along with walks in the sun for a long time. And I just kept gaining weight. If I ever didn't track my food, I was still being strict with my diet. I knew what I was up to. I had the same routine, but I would gain weight if I stopped tracking at all. If I took any breaths at all, like I didn't walk my 12 miles in the sun a day, my weight would start coming back on. And so eventually, this is when I decided I'm going to try the lion diet. And that is where you eat nothing but ruminant meat, salt, and water. And I documented all of that gloriousness on YouTube if you want to see, but I'm going to cut to the point. What you're not going to see is the part where my body stopped being okay with it. In the beginning, my body was so great, just like in the beginning of carnivore, in the beginning of sardine fasting, in the beginning of water fasting, my body was like, oh, this is so great. And you would feel like that surge of, yes, I've got this. Especially, we'll talk about food noise too. But yeah, the food noise. So when you go carnivore, your food noise goes down. And then for me, it came back probably around month 3. And I would fight and hunt to get that back and feeling like I'm doing something wrong because it came back. Maybe I need to sardine fast more. Maybe I need to lion diet more. Maybe I need to restrict more foods. Maybe it's the foods. And so I went lion diet. And then about 35 days in, I gained 14 pounds of inflammation in like 2-3 days. And my food noise went through the roof, and my hormones and my thyroid tanked. I know because I went and had them tested. My body said, no, restriction isn't the answer. More restriction isn't the answer. And that's when I had to sit back and start questioning all my beliefs on this carnivore diet. Another thing that had happened was I started this I started it in November of 2022, but I was like, I got rid of my, what they call a bridge, in January 2023. So I had kept some International Delight coffee creamer, and I had kept the coffee, and I had kept a few I had kept some stevia. And then in January, I cut the coffee, the creamer, the stevia. And so January 2023 is when I started this. It was in October of 2023. I had massive hair loss. Massive. I've lost hair before. Like there's kind of some shed cycles. I had never lost hair like this. It was devastating. My hair isn't the same to this day. And that was a year and a half ago. And to this day, my hair has not recovered. The reality is my hair is about this long, and everything past there basically fell out. Anything that was older than this fell out. I did not cut my hair. It used to be this long down here, and all hair that was older than this fell out. And that is when perimenopause started as well. So it was about 10 months in where my hormones had started tanking. There's more to that factor, but I just want to say I'm not the only person I've heard of this happening to. My cycles had been 28 days this whole time. I was struggling with that chronic illness, but I still had 28-day cycles. And 10 months into carnivore, my cycles went down to 21 days. And it wasn't just 21 days. It was 21 days of heck. It was 21 days of awfulness. It was 21 days of the cringies. It was 21 days of inflammation. It was 21 days of awfulness over and over and over again. And I would spot before my cycle came. So I start spotting around day 15, 16. Then I'd have my 5-day period. And so I was bleeding a lot during those 21 days. I'm sorry, men, you probably didn't want to know that. But as a female, it was devastating for this to happen, and just wonder, like, when is it going to fix itself? And it never did. So I was hoping the lion diet would make it better, and it didn't. So that's when I sat back and I waited for a new tool. I continued carnivore because of my reactive hypoglycemia, but I knew that something wasn't being healed with carnivore alone. And that's when later on I find GLP-1. And what GLP-1 does, because you guys follow me, you probably know, is it's a peptide that we have in our body. We have receptors all over our body, and it activates those receptors to start working again. And it also gives a level of GLP-1 that you're maybe deficient in. And when you have that hormone and you have the receptors working, now the rest of your hormones start working as well. So people who have PCOS, they'll see some relief. And then it gets your food, your blood sugar hormones, your insulin and your glucagon to start communicating with the pancreas as you're eating food. It's sending the right signals to use the energy. And it's also sending signals to your brain. And so that food noise that kept coming back, when your GLP-1 is actually working, you have proper signaling to your brain. And when your GLP-1 is properly working, you don't have improper weight gain due to the food you're eating. Because when I was carnivore, the first year, yes, I did some deficits, But then I realized it was triggering rebound eating where I would just start binge eating. So I recognized in year 1 that having too big of a deficit was causing binge eating rebounding. And so year 2, I was eating between 18, and again, I was tracking, because if I didn't track, I was gaining weight, 1,800 to 2,200 calories. So I'm not in this crazy deficit, and I'm doing that so that I don't have that rebound eating. I forgot where I was going with that. But anyway, so all these things I was doing, I would lose maybe 5-10 pounds, but I would just kind of gain it back. And I was like beating my head against the wall, trying all the different things. And you add a splice of GLP-1 that gets your hormones communicating. And I wasn't taking enough to have appetite suppression. I was eating full meals. I was tracking what I was eating. I had been warned about the muscle loss and the seriousness of the weight loss that you would lose being muscle, and the seriousness of getting your meat in. And so I was eating a lot of meat, and I wasn't taking a high enough dose that I couldn't eat my meat, and I was tracking. And so just to go off the beginning, people will totally disagree with me. The practitioner we work with, at first, she was kind of horrified when I said I was carnivore on a GLP-1. But if you want to get that weight off and keep your muscle, I don't think it's a bad way to go. But as I continued to go, and now we've got my hormones regulated, I noticed that I could stop tracking and not gain weight like I was before. I mean, I'm a very strict person with my food, but that was the first thing I noticed, was that once my weight was down, that once I hit the 140s for the first time in my life, I had some days where I didn't track, and I noticed that I didn't gain 10 pounds like I used to. So I noticed that my hormones were in fact communicating, and I'm having better insulin regulation to be properly using versus storing the energy. So the next thing that I did was attempt I did some experiments with adding foods that I hadn't eaten in years because of the reactive hypoglycemia. Because if my hormones are communicating properly, I should be able to eat that without bombing out and having hypoglycemia. And I'd seen other instances where people who had this reactive hypoglycemia were using Ozempic and Zepbound to help have an appropriate hormone response to food. And so I tried some things, and I was able to eat carbohydrates without hypoglycemia. And so I know that this is regulating my hormones in a way that I wasn't getting from any diet. In fact, we'll keep going into that. So I'm starting to wrap my brain around the fact that maybe food wasn't the problem. Like, okay, not processed foods. We're not going to go there. Processed foods were made to hijack your brain. They are already broken down. They slide through your gut, which doesn't give your gut time to have appropriate hormone responses. It doesn't give it time to give the signal to your brain. It doesn't give it time to properly have a blood sugar response. And so it slides through so quickly that it doesn't give you satiation ever. And it gives that feeling in your mouth that you just want over and over and over again. So you're not getting brain signaling, you're not getting full, but you're getting that joy in your mouth. So processed foods were made to hijack our body. So that is not what I'm talking about. But I am talking about whole foods. Like, if you can't eat whole foods without it triggering a bunch of addiction, a bunch of hedonic behavior to eat, that is a sign that the signaling isn't proper, because our body should be able to eat those things. So I'm starting to wrap my brain around, maybe some people were right. Maybe we don't all have to be carnivore. There was a thing for carnivore, which is, hey, this is the primal way to eat. And that made so much sense for me, going back to that TV show Alone, where they had to eat meat or they were med-vaced out, because if you don't have your $1,000 supplements from GNC, you're going to be malnourished in a hot second if you're not eating any meat at all. So lesson here before I keep going on is, I 100,000,000,000% think that we should still be on a meat-heavy diet. But going into so I start rethinking my primal thinking. And I have two friends, Joe and Rachel, the two crazy ketos. And Joe, they got me cruising, because they did a cruise, and I was like, I want to cruise, and I like you people. There's something about them. I always liked them, even though they were keto and I was carnivore. You know, there's a space where keto and carnivore are the same thing, but whatever. So I go on this cruise, and Joe explains to me, he says, there's been no society on earth that was ever 100% carnivore endlessly year upon year upon year. You know, everybody cycled eating plants throughout the year. And so his seed was back there. He's always been back there bothering me, as I was like, carnivore is the way. But Joe was sitting back there going, but what society was only eating meat? Like what, and carnivores will tell you that there's these Eskimos. Okay, but are we talking like a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand people out of the billions of people that have ever been on this earth? Overall speaking, as human beings, we did eat both plants and animals. Okay, so that's when carnivores would say, but what about the lectins and oxalates? Well, I think we have a lectin and oxalate bucket that we are able to process so many of these. And the problem is that we have been told plants are the best our whole life. So we were overeating plants, and they've even been telling us to eat the high oxalate plants. Even worse, I was throwing almonds in my blender and spinach and almond milk and getting the worst gut and having no idea why my stomach hurts so bad, having no idea that I just poisoned myself with like a crazy amount of oxalates. And yeah, if you don't know about the oxalate thing, like a lot of the stones that are forming, it's because you have been overdosing yourself with oxalates. Your body didn't know how to process it, so it stuffed it places and you have stones. And eventually, sometimes it'll process it. It'll often process it when you're losing weight. And so then you'll blame losing weight on the stone when in fact it was just your body saying, hey, I have space to process this right now. And it's getting stuck and inflamed and it's not good. And one more thing I learned from the carnivore community was about the gallbladder. This one's interesting. And you guys know, because you guys are all carnivore. But if you're not carnivore, do you know about the gallbladder? And why do people get gallbladder sludge and stones? Because of prolonged low-fat diets. And I had pretty consistent gallbladder sludge that would cause me to get fevers from the pain. And since eating a carnivore diet, I think that my gallbladder has become healthy again because it is a muscle that you can rebuild. You do not have to have your gallbladder removed unless it is septically going to explode from infection. Other than that, you can, if you're having continual sludge, you can rebuild that muscle. I have. And I was having this sludge. You can look in my hospital record, the number of times I ended up going to the ER because I would end up with these high fevers and I couldn't get the pain to go away. So when we don't use an organ properly over time, it seems to have issues. Okay, so we're going to go back into that in a second. Okay, so we're processing the primal diet. Okay, so I think most people would have been someplace where there was as many resources as possible, and less people would be living in desolate areas that are freezing cold, where the winter is really rough, and you're going to have a difficult time sourcing food, and you'll have a difficult time hunting, and you'll have a difficult time living and not getting freezing cold. And so I think people would have lived closer to the equator. People would have lived where there was more growing seasons, and you would have had access to plants. Were we looking at lettuce going, let me have some seed oil and let's have a feast of seed oil and leaves? No. But I think we probably were excited when we saw fruit. We were excited when we saw honey. I think we would have gorged ourselves on fruit actually because it doesn't stay super long. It just has a short season. So we would have just gorged ourselves competing with the other animals and birds and bugs. And so I think our body was made to probably, as I'm thinking about this, our body was probably made to handle a whole bunch of fruit in a season. I could picture too, if we're hunting, that we didn't, one thing that is just so big in the community, even my community, is that we have to eat breakfast. It's good for your blood sugar and your hormones and your cortisol. But I think we would have woke up. We didn't just have a bunch of eggs sitting there. If we did, the bears came overnight and ate them. So I think we would have had to wake up. We probably would have picked some plants along the way as people were. We would have had to gather something and then maybe went out and hunted. And then you have to cook your hunt. And so it makes a lot more sense that it would have been normal. Now, I'm part Native American, so I'm kind of honing in on my Native American here, thinking we probably would have feasted every night. And here's another thing. When you go to other countries, they're eating at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. So it's only our country where we're like, oh, it's the timing of your food. That's totally the problem. In other countries, they're eating a lot of pastries and coffee, and they're not struggling like we are. Their rates are not rampant like we are, and they're eating late at night. But we're banging our heads with all of these things. Primarily, I think we would have eaten plants and animals. Here's the thing, though, that we overate them, and so we have some buildup in our system. Would there have been seasons, though, where we were just carnivore? I think so. And I think that's why we feel so good on it. Because I do think it's natural that we would have had seasons where we just ate meat because that's what was available. Let's go into fat. Do you think that we ate a bunch of fatty animals? I don't know, because if we're hunting, there's going to be seasons where the animals are pretty lean, first of all. But even when they're in their fattest, are they that fat? They're doing a lot of roaming and they're eating a natural diet, so they wouldn't be fatty like they are today. And so these people who are pushing these high fat diets, I don't know. I don't think fat's as evil as we were animal fat. I don't think animal fat is as evil as we were told. I think there's a reason our body craves it because it is healing. But I don't know if a full fat diet is actually that primal. Just my opinion. Okay. So we went through primal. So food noise. I think what's going on with food noise, if eating just meat actually cures your food noise and it never comes back, I think you're pretty metabolically healthy. I think that's a great thing. And I hope that for most people. Before I keep going, even, I just want to say we are all so different. There are people in the comments who will say, are you trying to say that you're not a biological human? And it was like, I don't even know what you're trying to say here. Are you trying to say that we can't be biologically different? Because we are. First of all, men have a totally different organ than I do. You literally cannot say we're the same. But secondly, if you look at just women and you look at a 20-year-old woman versus a 65-year-old woman, not the same. So to just throw something blanket on the whole society, I'm not into it anymore. I don't think everyone should be this or everyone should be that. And I also think what works for you is great. That doesn't work for me. And what works for me doesn't work for you. And we all just have to be flexible with the idea that we are, in fact, all different and that our body actually needs different things throughout time. Like I just said, I think that there were absolutely seasons of carnivore, and that's probably why it feels pretty amazing when you do it for a short period of time. I think if you're metabolically healthy, I think you can do it a long period of time. I know people who are very metabolically healthy and they've been doing it for decades. Okay, so I think it's possible if you're metabolically healthy that your body can handle a lot and that it can do this. But in my example, 10 months in, it was such a stressor on my body that my hormones and my thyroid tanked and my hair fell out. And it wasn't all because of this crazy calorie deficit. I think it was the stress of if you're not super metabolically healthy, which I'm a chronic weight gainer, which is an indication that you have metabolic syndrome, then it's a stressor on your body because meat and fat take time and energy to turn into energy versus giving yourself some sugar, some fruit, some plant, some carbohydrate, that is quick energy for your body. So when your body's already stressed out, like I already had adrenal fatigue coming into this, and then I tell my body, listen, the only way you're going to get energy is to go through this long, strenuous process. I think over time, prolonged, not short periods, but prolonged 2 years, for me, 10 months, I think it's a stressor on the body. And it wasn't doing me a favor after then, except I still have the problem of the hypoglycemia. I still have the problem of the chronic weight gain. I still have all these other problems that it seemed to be blunting. So we got to go into some more answers. I made some amazing notes here, but I just continued to ramble instead. Let's see here. Okay, so if you're having food noise and the food noise comes back, to me, that is a sign that your hormone pathways are blocked to your brain. Why is that happening? We'll go into that a little bit, maybe, of my ideas, but I don't think we actually know, and I don't know that anybody actually has a way to heal it. People claim they do, take their supplements, do their fasting protocols, do their this protocol, do their that protocol, but I don't know anybody who's been chronic like me whose pathways are just better now and they didn't continue to struggle even with all of the protocols. But I could be wrong. If you are a person who struggled with chronic weight gain as a child all the way through adulthood, no matter which diets you did, no matter how much fasting you did, and you were able to get your food noise to permanently go away, not for 3 months, not for 9 months, but let's say 5 years, you're 5 years into this protocol and your food noise is still gone, let me know in the comments, okay? Because that would give me hope and an idea, okay? So again, my thought process is changing throughout time. So if you have different information, I'm open to hearing it. But please don't tell me you know mate tea. Okay, so clearly my brain has been twisted in knots because previously I was like, less carbs is the answer. Before less carbs, it was less fat was the answer, which turns out eating low fat for prolonged periods of time causes issues in your gallbladder and your bile and your stomach production and your healing and your hormones and your thyroid. Low fat is a disaster for your body. I'm starting to believe in some bodies that zero carb prolonged isn't a great thing either. I'm wondering if you don't use your pancreas appropriately, if prolonged periods of not using your pancreas appropriately, and there was a problem to begin with because you were having chronic weight gain, if it actually makes it worse. And I know some carnivores will say, but my A1C is great and my insulin number is great. What I would love to see is for those people to eat some carbohydrates and retake the test. I would love to see if your body actually responds appropriately to carbohydrates or not, because avoiding the problem doesn't mean that the problem is healed. So I would love to know, for all of them out there who have been strict carnivore for a long period of time, if you eat some carbohydrates and you retake those tests, now what do they say? Because if they're still good, okay, I believe you. You are actually healed and I'm very happy for you. But I'm very concerned that anybody, and why am I saying this? Because there's people in my group who have been carnivore for 5 and 10 years and they didn't have reactive hypoglycemia before, but now when they eat carbohydrates, because they weren't using that insulin muscle, now they are having the same issue that I am from my surgery. And it kind of makes me wonder if it actually isn't just my surgery or if it's because I have been low carb for 11 years. And before that, I was also low carb. I just know for a fact that since my surgery, I haven't eaten cookies and ice cream, and I have been very whole foods low carb since my surgery. And it was forced because of the hypoglycemia that came about 6 months after. Okay, so let me see here. Eating before bed, we talked about that. Hormone disruption. Okay. So if avoiding carbohydrates, why do we have this issue? I think we have this issue because there is actual damage in the gut and it's not just bad bacteria. I think perhaps the pesticides we're consuming, the medications we've consumed, whether a man-made or a natural virus has hit us and destroyed our gut or destroyed gut lining or even destroyed, I think even high fevers at any point, prolonged high fevers can cause nerve damage. And our gut is a brain, and so is our intestine with tons of nerve endings. And if those are damaged, now the body is going to struggle to get signaling to the pancreas and the brain. And so I think that is the primary reason why, for people who are continuing to struggle with their weight, there is no relief permanently through diet, because there is actually a signaling problem from a physiological damage that has occurred. There are some people who claim that there is a heat or a laser treatment that's non-invasive that can get your body to regenerate the lining and the nerves. But right now, that's not mainstream. And is that the only place with damage, or perhaps is there damage on the receptors on our brain as well? Is there damage in other places that actually needs to be healed? And so when you look at diet and then you look at that, you go, oh, that's why diet isn't working. Diet alone. Now, I have been, continuing to eat a meat-based diet. Okay, so we've got the pesticides, the antibiotics, the viruses. Now we've got, our homes are being made out of toxic materials. Sorry, they are. They're being made out of horrible toxic materials. Then when you get them wet, they turn even more toxic. And you've got the stuff in the air, in the water, in our clothing. We've got the radiation coming from every direction. We're being hit with hormone disruption everywhere we go. And even I have cleaned that up literally over the last 7 years, and even slowly cleaning it up, it really hasn't changed the fact that there's something damaged in my body. And I'm seeing it in other people as well. And so I also think there's a mind-body piece here too, where we have to take what we can, fix what we can, and then just believe that our bodies are resilient enough to deal with the stress that's coming in and become stronger. So there's a mental piece here too. Okay, so where does that leave me and you and everyone else? For me, I still have this surgery. I'm never going to be on the sugar diet. Sorry to disappoint anybody, but unless I had the surgery reversed and it worked, which there's a chance that it can actually make it worse because it touches nerve endings, and more damage to nerve endings will equal more inappropriate hormone responses and inflammation and issues. So I am going to be a meat-based girl, and it's most likely never going to be a sugar diet for me. But I am working on this idea that your pancreas is a muscle. And I wonder if, now that I have some hormone assistance to get my hormones regulated, that I would be able to slowly incorporate some carbohydrates back and hope that that muscle gets stronger and stronger instead of weaker and weaker, which it has been getting over the last 20 years. So that's where I am. Now, as for everyone else, this is the important thing. We are truly all bio individuals. Some people are eating a very high fat diet. And although I don't see how that would be a continual, prolonged, natural thing that we would have access to, they feel amazing on it. And I do think that animal fat is very healing. And so if that is something you have access to and your body can handle it, I think that's great too. I think we should all do what makes us feel great. And I think that's going to change throughout time. Unfortunately for me with my surgery, it's not going to change that much throughout time, but I'm working on it. I definitely still see some advantages to doing a carnivore period. There's no doubt about it. It clears the slate for you understanding how much your food is affecting your body. And if you're having these huge food effects, it means something needs to be healed. Like with the plants, if you're eating a moderate amount of plants, that fiber should actually be great for your digestion. You shouldn't be getting this horrible bloat and gas and constipation. That's a sign you need the bacteria to realign. How would you do that? It's a deeper conversation, but I believe it stems from inflammation, reducing your inflammation, reducing your exposures. And when your body isn't inflamed, it can balance its bacteria pretty well, typically on its own. I'm hopeful for treatments in the future to really actually try to help our body assist in regenerating cells so that we actually heal nerve endings and heal damage. I think there's a lot of room there with bioregulators and peptides because those work with our body. They are from our body. They work with our body to get our body regenerating again. And some of these peptides and bioregulators can literally regenerate tissue. So I have a lot of hope that with the assistance of some things that work with our body, that we could actually be regenerating in the future and not have to be on anything long term. That's definitely my goal. My energy has been so much better lately because I have found different tools, different peptides and nootropics to help me have that energy and that brain power. But I know that I'm not nootropic deficient. I ultimately need to find out why is my energy continually tanking and relieve that so that I can have natural energy to be the Adrian I love to be. Okay, so I think that periods of carnivore are probably great for everyone, just like periods of, I think fasting can be a great tool for a lot of people. But I do have concern for people who are struggling metabolically, who are struggling with inflammation, prolonged periods of carnivore, because it can turn the other direction and be a stressor on the body. If you're for blood sugar, I don't think it is the ultimate ticket. I think people are going to be disappointed down the road to find that although you had relief from symptoms, the condition of inappropriate hormone response still remains and will continue to progress. I've had several friends who've had strokes and heart attacks, even eating clean and reducing their A1C, their insulin resistance and their exposure, their toxin exposure remained. So the root of the problem didn't get fixed because they thought that diet alone would be the ticket, and it just wasn't. So I think that it's good to not have toxic levels of blood sugar in your system, and you can artificially suppress that through diet. But ultimately, you need to get tools that will help your body have a better hormone response. So if you're having a poor hormone response to your food, I suggest you look into peptides and bioregulators, and maybe even this laser treatment that can help regenerate the lining so you can have an appropriate response. I don't think avoiding the subject altogether is going to produce long-term healing. And then as far as primal eating, we talked about how it's actually primal to have periods of carnivore and periods of whole foods. And yeah, so I hope you're not disappointed in me. I've been a carnivore purist for years, and it wasn't until I had a tool that actually helped me for the first time in my life have some appropriate hormone signaling to food that I got to experience of like, oh, this is what it's like to be a man. Just trying to be funny. Like men seem to be pretty resilient when it comes to food, at least until 35, where they could pretty much eat anything and get away with it, where that's never been my case in my entire life. I've always had to watch what I was eating. And it's not that I don't watch what I'm eating, it's that I can eat food without tracking, eat till I'm full without tracking. And this doesn't mean under eating. I'm pretty sure I'm overeating because I do spot check because I still wonder, where am I at? And I always worry about under eating, but I know I'm not under eating because I am maintaining my weight perfectly. And I feel like I'm a great size and I love my body composition. And the only thing I could work on is building more muscle, but I slowly have to do that because of my autoimmune and my Hashimoto's. So I feel like I'm for the first time in my life, I can just eat food and I am heavy on the meat, and I've been slowly experimenting with, I had some watermelon the other day. I had a starchy banana the other day without having any hypoglycemia. So anyway, comment below. What are your thoughts? Where is your brain at? What do you guys think? Do you guys think we should all be carnivore? Do you think we should all be vegan? Or do you think we're a bio individual? Did I miss something here? Let me know down below. And if you like this content, please like, subscribe, and share. Goodbye.